I sat in that cold courtroom, watching my own parents try to destroy my life. Their expensive lawyer presenting evidence, claiming I had stolen their retirement savings to fund my startup. My mother, Linda, sobbed dramatically into her handkerchief, telling the judge through her tears that they had given me every opportunity, and I threw it all away. My father, Frank, nodded gravely beside their high-priced attorney, his face a mask of disappointed betrayal. My overwhelmed public defender shuffled through papers nervously, clearly outmatched by their legal team. Then suddenly Judge Harrison stopped reading the documents spread before him, looked up slowly with piercing eyes, and said something that made my heart stop. He had read about my company in Forbes just last week, and someone in this courtroom was lying directly to his face. The memory of how I got to this nightmare moment felt surreal as I sat there listening to my mother's theatrical performance. Growing up in our modest suburban Denver neighborhood, Frank and Linda appeared to be the picture-perfect supportive parents. Dad worked his way up to regional manager at Mountain Communications, while Mom dedicated her life to teaching third graders at Westfield Elementary School. Their tidy ranch house on Maple Street showcased family photos documenting every milestone of my childhood, from Little League championships to science fair victories. Yet beneath their encouraging smiles lay something more controlling than nurturing. They constantly steered me toward safe traditional career paths whenever I expressed interest in technology or entrepreneurship. During high school, when I built my first computer from salvaged parts and started a small repair business, they insisted I focus on academics instead of playing around with gadgets. Their version of support always came with strings attached and expectations that aligned with their vision of success, not mine. At Colorado State University, I pursued computer science despite their subtle pressure to choose accounting or business management. During my sophomore year, I attempted to apply for a student credit card to build my financial history, only to discover my credit score was mysteriously damaged. Multiple inquiries showed on my report for loans I had never requested, along with several late payments on accounts I did not recognize. The discovery sent panic through my 20-year-old mind. When I confronted my parents about the credit damage, they immediately expressed shock and concern. Dad's face flushed with anger as he demanded to know who would do such a thing to his son. Mom wrapped her arms around me, promising they would help me fight this injustice together. They drove me to the bank the next morning, where we filed identity theft reports and began the arduous process of disputing fraudulent charges. For months, they helped me navigate the bureaucratic maze of credit repair, constantly reassuring me that everything would work out fine. Their support felt genuine at the time, but something nagged at the back of my mind. How had someone obtained my social security number and personal information so easily? The bank representative mentioned that most identity theft cases involved family members or close friends who had access to sensitive documents. When I mentioned this observation to my parents, they dismissed the idea as ridiculous, suggesting that criminals had probably accessed my information through data breaches or stolen mail. After graduation, I landed a programming position at TechFlow Solutions, a mid-sized software company in downtown Denver. The work satisfied my analytical mind, but my real passion lay in developing my own technological solutions to real-world problems. During evenings and weekends, I researched water purification challenges facing rural American communities, discovering that millions of people in small towns and remote areas lacked access to clean, reliable drinking water sources. My breakthrough came when I conceptualized AquaConnect, a revolutionary app that would connect rural communities with certified water testing services, purification equipment suppliers, and government assistance programs. The platform would allow users to submit water samples for analysis, receive detailed reports about contamination levels, and access resources for implementing appropriate filtration systems. Local hardware stores could partner with the app to provide equipment, while environmental engineers could offer consultation services through the platform. The concept excited me beyond anything I had ever imagined. Working late into the night, I developed prototypes and business models, researching market demand and regulatory requirements. When venture capitalists began expressing interest in preliminary presentations, I realized this idea could transform both my career and countless communities struggling with water quality issues. That was when my parents suddenly became my biggest supporters. Frank would call every few days asking about my progress, while Linda brought home-cooked meals to my apartment so I could focus on development work. Their enthusiasm felt overwhelming after years of subtle discouragement about entrepreneurial pursuits. When I mentioned needing initial funding to hire developers and purchase testing equipment, they surprised me by offering their retirement savings as seed money. The generous offer felt too good to be true, and my instincts warned me to proceed carefully. Yet seeing their genuine excitement about my success made me feel guilty for questioning their motives. They had supported me through the identity theft crisis, helped me rebuild my credit, and now wanted to invest in my future. Perhaps I had misjudged their earlier caution as lack of faith rather than protective concern. But late at night, as I reviewed financial projections and development timelines, a disturbing realization crept into my consciousness. The timing of my credit damage coincided perfectly with my 17th birthday, when I would have become eligible for certain types of loans and credit accounts. The fraudulent applications all originated from Denver area banks, where my parents held accounts. Most unsettling of all, the identity theft had effectively prevented me from building independent credit or accessing financial resources during college, keeping me dependent on my family for support. Could my own parents have sabotaged my credit to maintain control over my financial future? The thought seemed too horrible to contemplate, yet the evidence kept pointing in their direction. As I prepared to accept their investment offer, I wondered if I was walking into a trap that had been years in the making. 6 months after launching AquaConnect with my parents' investment, the company began gaining significant traction throughout Colorado and neighboring states. Our first major success came when we helped the town of Riverside population 852 identify and resolve lead contamination in their municipal water system. Local newspapers picked up the story, featuring our innovative platform as a technological solution to infrastructure challenges plaguing small American communities. I hired my college roommate, Bradley Morrison, as business partner, impressed by his marketing expertise and connections within the environmental consulting industry. Bradley's smooth presentations and networking skills complemented my technical background perfectly, creating a dynamic partnership that attracted additional investors and government contracts. We also brought on my cousin Marcus, whose programming abilities helped us scale the platform rapidly across multiple states. Our downtown Denver office buzzed with activity as we expanded our team and refined our services. Frank and Linda visited frequently, always expressing pride in my accomplishments and curiosity about our growth strategies. Mom would bring fresh-baked cookies for the entire staff, while Dad asked detailed questions about our financial projections and intellectual property protections. Their involvement felt supportive initially, but gradually their inquiries became more invasive and specific. During one particularly busy afternoon, Linda arrived unannounced with lunch for everyone, then spent the next 2 hours asking Marcus about our database security protocols and backup procedures. When I questioned her sudden interest in technical details, she laughed and claimed she was simply trying to understand my work better. Frank began requesting copies of our quarterly reports and partnership agreements, explaining that he wanted to track his investment carefully. The turning point came when I noticed Bradley behaving strangely during client meetings and strategy sessions. His usual confident demeanor shifted to nervous distraction, and he began taking private phone calls in the parking lot rather than his office. When potential investors asked detailed questions about our long-term vision, Bradley would defer to me instead of sharing his own insights as he had done previously. One evening in late November, I returned to the office around 9 o'clock to retrieve my laptop charger, which I had forgotten in the rush to make a dinner appointment. The building appeared empty, but I noticed lights still burning in the conference room on our floor. Assuming Marcus was working late on a debugging project, I quietly entered through the back entrance to avoid disturbing him. The voices coming from the conference room stopped me cold. Bradley was speaking in hushed, urgent tones to someone on his phone, discussing strategies for keeping Isaac in the dark until all the papers are signed and filed. My blood ran cold as I realized he was plotting against me with an unknown conspirator. I pressed myself against the wall outside the conference room, straining to hear more details. Bradley's conversation revealed a shocking betrayal. He was coordinating with my parents and an attorney to gradually gain control of Aqua Connect by presenting me as mentally unstable and financially irresponsible. The plan involved documenting my supposedly erratic behavior, questioning my decision-making abilities in front of other staff members, and building a case for removing me from leadership positions within my own company. Fighting nausea. I followed Bradley when he left the building 20 minutes later. He drove across town to Romano's, an upscale Italian restaurant in Cherry Creek, where I watched through the window as he joined my parents at a corner table. The scene looked like a family dinner, until I noticed the fourth person, a distinguished man in an expensive suit who was spreading legal documents across the table between the wine glasses and bread baskets. Frank and Linda laughed as they reviewed the papers, occasionally pointing at specific sections, while the attorney nodded approvingly. Bradley appeared nervous but engaged, asking questions and taking notes in a small leather notebook. The attorney pulled out additional folders displaying what appeared to be financial statements and business valuations. My parents looked delighted as they examined these documents, Frank clapping Bradley on the shoulder, while Linda raised her wine glass in a celebratory toast. The sight of my own family conspiring with my business partner felt like watching my entire world collapse in slow motion. These people who claimed to love and support me were actively planning to steal the company I had built from nothing. The retirement savings they had invested were being used as leverage to gain control over my life's work, and Bradley was helping them accomplish this theft by providing inside information and credible testimony about my supposed incompetence. I sat in my car outside the restaurant for nearly an hour, watching their animated conversation and trying to process the magnitude of their betrayal. Every supportive conversation, every encouraging visit, every proud moment they had shared with me was revealed as manipulation designed to position themselves for this ultimate theft. My parents had not invested in my success. They had purchased the tools for my destruction. When they finally left the restaurant, embracing Bradley warmly before departing in separate vehicles, I realized that tomorrow would bring new challenges as they continued implementing their scheme. The question was whether I could gather enough evidence to protect myself before they succeeded in stealing everything I had worked to build. The drive home felt endless as I grappled with the reality that my greatest enemies were the people who had raised me, and my trusted business partner was leading the assault on my future. The next morning brought the most difficult conversation of my life as I confronted my parents about their secret meeting with Bradley. I arrived at their house before 7 o'clock, knowing Dad's routine of reading the newspaper with his coffee before work. When I walked into their kitchen without knocking, as I had done countless times throughout my childhood, their faces registered genuine surprise rather than guilt. Linda immediately embraced me, commenting on how wonderful it was to see me so early in the morning. Frank lowered his newspaper and invited me to join them for breakfast, acting completely natural and relaxed. When I directly accused them of meeting with Bradley and an attorney to discuss taking control of my company, Their reactions seemed authentically shocked and hurt. Dad's face flushed with indignation as he demanded to know where I had gotten such a ridiculous idea. Mom's eyes filled with tears as she asked how I could believe they would ever harm my business after investing their retirement savings to help me succeed. Their denials felt so convincing that I began questioning what I had witnessed the previous evening. Perhaps the meeting had been coincidental, or maybe I had misunderstood the context of their discussion. Frank explained that they had indeed met Bradley for dinner, but only to discuss surprising me with additional financial support for expansion into new markets. The attorney was Bradley's friend who specialized in business law, and they had been exploring options for protecting our intellectual property and establishing more formal partnership structures. Dad seemed genuinely hurt that I would interpret their supportive efforts as betrayal. Linda's tears appeared completely genuine, as she described how proud they were of my accomplishments and how much they wanted to help me succeed beyond their wildest dreams. She reminded me of all the sacrifices they had made throughout my childhood to provide opportunities for education and growth. The emotional manipulation felt overwhelming, and I left their house feeling confused and guilty for accusing them of treachery. At the office, Bradley greeted me normally and showed no signs of suspicious behavior. When I carefully broached the subject of his dinner with my parents, he confirmed their story about discussing additional investment opportunities and legal protections for the company. His explanation seemed reasonable, and his demeanor remained friendly and professional throughout our conversation. However, Marcus noticed troubling changes in our company's financial situation that could not be explained away so easily. Several unauthorized transfers had drained significant funds from our operating accounts, supposedly for equipment purchases and marketing expenses that Marcus could not locate in our records. When he brought these discrepancies to my attention, we discovered that Bradley had approval authority for transactions up to $25,000, a limit we had established during our initial partnership agreement. The mysterious transfers totaled nearly $87,000 over the past 6 weeks, representing almost half of our available operating capital. When I confronted Bradley about these expenditures, he produced invoices and receipts for consulting services, software licensing fees, and promotional materials. However, Marcus's investigation revealed that several of the vendors listed on these documents did not exist, while others had no record of conducting business with our company. Faced with mounting evidence of financial irregularities, I hired Patricia Gonzalez, a private investigator recommended by my attorney, to conduct a thorough background investigation into the recent suspicious activities surrounding Aqua Connect. Patricia's initial findings were more disturbing than I had anticipated, revealing a sophisticated scheme designed to systematically strip away my control over the company while building a legal case for my removal. Her investigation uncovered that my parents had been meeting regularly with Bradley for over 3 months, long before their supposed spontaneous decision to provide additional investment support. Phone records showed numerous calls between Linda and Bradley during business hours, often lasting 30 to 45 minutes each. Bank statements revealed that Frank and Linda had not actually used their retirement savings to invest in my company. Instead, they had taken out multiple personal loans using my Social Security number and credit history as collateral. The most shocking revelation came when Patricia discovered that my parents had convinced Bradley to help them document my supposed mental instability and financial irresponsibility. Bradley had been secretly recording our conversations, photographing confidential documents, and maintaining detailed notes about my daily activities and decision-making processes. These records were being compiled into a comprehensive dossier that portrayed me as an unstable individual who posed a threat to the company's future success. Bank records revealed the true extent of my parents' financial deception. Rather than investing their retirement savings, They had actually spent those funds on gambling debts at 3 different Colorado casinos' luxury purchases, including a new BMW for Linda and expensive jewelry for both of them, and payments to the attorney who was helping them plan my downfall. To cover their theft, they had forged my signature on multiple loan documents and used my credit to secure lines of credit totaling over $200,000. Patricia's investigation also revealed that Frank and Linda had filed false reports with local police and the Colorado Attorney General's office, claiming that I had stolen their retirement funds and was refusing to repay their investment. These complaints created an official record of their accusations, providing documentation that could be used in future legal proceedings to support their claims of financial abuse. The elaborate nature of their scheme became clear as Patricia presented her findings. My parents had not spontaneously decided to invest in my company. They had planned this theft from the moment I began developing AquaConnect. Their early support and encouragement had been calculated manipulation designed to gain access to my business plans and financial information. The identity theft I had experienced during college was not random criminal activity, but rather my parents' deliberate attempt to damage my credit and maintain control over my financial independence. Bradley's betrayal cut even deeper than my parents' schemes. As my trusted partner, he had access to every aspect of our business operations, client information, and strategic planning. His cooperation with my parents' plot meant that no conversation, document, or decision within our company was safe from their surveillance. The partnership I had believed was built on mutual respect and shared vision was actually an elaborate deception designed to facilitate my destruction. As I reviewed Patricia's evidence late into the night, the full scope of my family's betrayal became undeniably clear. They had systematically positioned themselves to steal my life's work while portraying themselves as loving parents concerned about their son's welfare. The retirement savings they claimed to have invested were actually stolen funds obtained through identity theft and fraud, making me unknowingly complicit in their criminal activities. The realization that I could trust no one in my family or business felt like standing at the edge of an abyss, with the ground crumbling beneath my feet. 3 weeks after Patricia completed her investigation, a process server arrived at my apartment with legal documents that would change everything. My parents had filed a comprehensive lawsuit against me claiming fraud, theft, elder abuse, and breach of fiduciary duty. The 37-page complaint painted me as a manipulative con artist who had exploited my elderly parents' trust and love to steal their retirement savings for my personal gain. Their attorney, Kevin Morrison, from the prestigious law firm Morrison, Caldwell and Associates, had crafted a compelling narrative that would resonate with any jury. According to their version of events, Frank and Linda were devoted parents who had worked hard their entire lives to build a modest retirement fund. When their beloved son approached them with an investment opportunity, they had trusted him completely and handed over their life savings without hesitation. Instead of using their money responsibly, I had allegedly squandered their funds on personal expenses, luxury items, and risky business ventures, while refusing to provide financial accountings or repay their investment. The local media immediately latched onto the story, portraying it as a heartbreaking case of family betrayal and elder abuse. Channel 9's morning news program featured an interview with my parents, where Linda dabbed her eyes with tissues while describing how much they had sacrificed to give me every opportunity in life. Frank spoke quietly about the pain of watching their son transform from a loving child into someone they no longer recognized, someone who would steal from his own family without remorse. The newspaper coverage was equally devastating. The Denver Post ran a front-page story titled "Local Couple Sues Son for Theft of Retirement Funds," complete with a photograph of my parents looking frail and heartbroken outside the courthouse. The article quoted neighbors who described Frank and Linda as pillars of the community, wonderful people who had devoted their lives to helping others through Frank's work and Linda's teaching career. My photograph appeared smaller in the bottom corner, making me look guilty and defiant. Public opinion turned against me rapidly as the story spread through social media and local news outlets. Former classmates, business contacts, and community members who had previously congratulated me on AquaConnect's success now viewed me with suspicion and disgust. Several clients canceled their contracts, citing concerns about working with someone facing serious fraud allegations. Potential investors withdrew their interest, explaining that they could not risk association with such negative publicity. The preliminary hearing took place on a cold Tuesday morning in February. Judge Rebecca Martinez presided over the proceedings, listening carefully as Morrison presented his opening arguments. He described my parents as victims of a sophisticated scheme orchestrated by their own son, someone they had trusted implicitly and loved unconditionally. Morrison's presentation was polished and persuasive, highlighting my parents' modest background and their genuine desire to support my entrepreneurial dreams. When Morrison began presenting evidence, the case against me appeared overwhelming. He displayed bank records showing large transfers from my parents' accounts to AquaConnect, followed by additional withdrawals for what he claimed were my personal expenses. Financial documents revealed that my parents had indeed liquidated their retirement savings, taking significant tax penalties to access funds for my supposed investment opportunity. But Morrison's most devastating evidence came when he produced comprehensive medical records from Serenity Hills Psychiatric Treatment Center, a prestigious facility in Boulder. According to these documents, I had been secretly receiving treatment for severe bipolar disorder, cocaine addiction, and narcissistic personality disorder for the past 18 months. The records included detailed therapy session notes describing my violent outbursts, threats against family members, and grandiose delusions about my business success. Dr. Robert Whitman, supposedly my treating psychiatrist, had documented numerous sessions where I allegedly admitted to stealing money from my parents and expressed no remorse for my actions. The therapy notes described my increasing paranoia and aggression, including threats to hurt my parents if they tried to interfere with my business operations. According to these medical records, my drug addiction had escalated to the point where I was spending thousands of dollars per week on cocaine and prescription stimulants. Judge Martinez reviewed the medical documentation with obvious concern, questioning how someone with such serious mental health and substance abuse issues could be trusted to manage other people's investments. The psychiatric records appeared completely legitimate, featuring official letterhead, proper formatting, and detailed clinical observations that would be difficult to fabricate. Morrison argued that my parents had only learned about my psychiatric treatment when they became concerned about my erratic behavior and contacted Dr. Whitman directly. Upon discovering the extent of my mental illness and drug addiction, they had attempted to intervene by offering support and guidance. Instead of accepting help, I had allegedly become more aggressive and paranoid, accusing them of plotting against me and threatening to destroy their reputations if they tried to recover their stolen money. The judge ordered an immediate psychiatric evaluation to assess my current mental state and determine whether I posed a danger to myself or others. She also froze all AquaConnect assets pending a thorough investigation into the allegations of fraud and financial impropriety. The court appointed Dr. Sarah Chen, a respected forensic psychiatrist, to conduct a comprehensive evaluation and report her findings within 30 days. My public defender, Jennifer Walsh, appeared overwhelmed by the complexity of the case and the sophistication of Morrison's evidence. During our brief conference after the hearing, she admitted that the medical records were particularly damaging because they seemed to corroborate my parents' claims about my mental instability and dangerous behavior. Walsh explained that fighting such comprehensive psychiatric documentation would require expert witnesses and extensive investigation resources that were not available through the public defender's office. As I left the courthouse that afternoon, reporters surrounded me with cameras and microphones demanding explanations for the serious allegations against me. I had no answers that would not sound like the desperate excuses of a guilty person. The medical records were so detailed and convincing that even I began questioning whether I might have some suppressed memories of psychiatric treatment or substance abuse problems. The asset freeze meant that I could no longer pay my apartment rent or cover basic living expenses. AquaConnect's operations were suspended indefinitely, leaving our employees without jobs and our clients without support. Marcus remained loyal, but faced increasing pressure from his family to distance himself from the scandal. Bradley expressed sympathy for my situation, but explained that he needed to protect his own reputation and career interests. That night, sleeping in my car in a 24-hour diner parking lot, I realized that my parents' scheme was more sophisticated and comprehensive than I had ever imagined. They had not simply stolen my money. They had systematically destroyed my reputation, my relationships, my business, and my credibility. The medical records were so convincing that even people who knew me well were beginning to believe that I might actually be mentally ill and dangerous. The next few weeks brought a complete collapse of everything I had built over the past 5 years. My landlord received a court order to evict me due to the asset freeze, forcing me to pack my belongings into my aging Honda Civic and search for temporary shelter. Friends who had once invited me to social gatherings now avoided my phone calls, uncomfortable with the negative publicity surrounding the lawsuit. Former colleagues whispered about my supposed drug addiction and mental illness, treating me like a dangerous stranger rather than someone they had worked alongside for months. Marcus stood by me despite mounting pressure from his own family to distance himself from the scandal. His parents, who had previously praised my entrepreneurial success, now questioned his judgment for remaining loyal to someone facing such serious criminal allegations. During one particularly painful conversation at a coffee shop downtown, Marcus confided that his girlfriend had threatened to leave him if he continued working with me, believing that association with my legal troubles would damage his career prospects permanently. The court-appointed psychiatric evaluation with Dr. Sarah Chen provided my only hope for clearing my reputation. Dr. Chen conducted extensive interviews, psychological testing, and medical examinations over the course of 2 weeks. Her thorough approach impressed me as she asked detailed questions about my personal history, family relationships, business practices, and mental health symptoms. Unlike the prosecutors and media representatives who seemed determined to prove my guilt, Dr. Chen appeared genuinely interested in discovering the truth. During our final session, Dr. Chen delivered her preliminary findings. She had found no evidence of bipolar disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, or substance abuse in my current psychological profile. My cognitive functioning, emotional regulation, and behavioral patterns were completely normal for someone experiencing severe stress related to legal and financial difficulties. Blood tests revealed no trace of cocaine, amphetamines, or other illegal substances, and my physical examination showed no signs of long-term drug abuse. However, Dr. Chen's positive evaluation was overshadowed by the seemingly official medical records from Serenity Hills Psychiatric Treatment Center. The documentation appeared so comprehensive and professionally prepared that even Dr. Chen admitted she was puzzled by the discrepancy between my current mental state and the severe pathology described in the psychiatric facility's reports. One sleepless night, as I sat in my car outside the 24-hour diner where I had been spending most evenings, a memory surfaced that changed everything. During my junior year at Colorado State University, I had participated in a research project for my abnormal psychology class that involved interviewing patients and staff at various mental health facilities throughout the Denver metro area. One of the locations we visited was Serenity Hills Psychiatric Treatment Center, an impressive facility nestled in the foothills west of Boulder. The memory seemed insignificant until I recalled something unusual about that visit. Our professor had mentioned that Serenity Hills was one of the most advanced psychiatric facilities in the region, featuring cutting-edge treatment programs and state-of-the-art technology. We had toured the grounds extensively, interviewing both patients and clinical staff about innovative therapeutic approaches being developed at the facility. But something disturbing nagged at the edge of my consciousness about that research trip. I remembered our professor receiving a phone call during our visit, after which he gathered our group together and explained that we needed to leave immediately due to an emergency situation. We had assumed someone was experiencing a psychiatric crisis, but now I wondered if there had been a different type of emergency entirely. The next morning, I drove to the Colorado State University Library to access their newspaper archives and research the history of Serenity Hills Psychiatric Treatment Center. What I discovered made my hands shake as I scrolled through the digital records on the library computer terminal. Serenity Hills had been destroyed in a massive electrical fire exactly 37 months ago, just 6 weeks after my research visit during college. The blaze had started in the facility's main administrative building, where patient records and clinical documentation were stored, then spread rapidly through the interconnected structures. Despite the efforts of multiple fire departments from Boulder County, the entire complex had burned to the ground over the course of 8 hours. The newspaper coverage described the fire as a tragic loss for the mental health community, as Serenity Hills had served over 1,500 patients and employed nearly 200 clinical and administrative staff members. Fortunately, the evacuation procedures had been executed flawlessly, and no lives were lost in the disaster. However, decades of patient records, research data, and clinical documentation had been completely destroyed in the flames. The most significant detail was the date of the fire, August 14th, 3 years ago. According to the medical records Morrison had presented in court, I had supposedly been receiving treatment at Serenity Hills as recently as last month, receiving therapy sessions and psychiatric evaluations in a facility that had been nothing but ashes and debris for over 3 years. Armed with this crucial evidence, I immediately contacted Jennifer Walsh to share my discovery. Her reaction was initially skeptical, as she had been overwhelmed by the apparent legitimacy of the psychiatric records. However, when I provided her with newspaper clippings, fire department reports, and insurance documentation, proving that Serenity Hills had been destroyed years before my supposed treatment dates, her demeanor changed completely. Walsh's investigation into the medical records revealed additional inconsistencies that had not been apparent during the initial review. The psychiatric facility's letterhead featured a street address that had been vacant since the fire, and the phone numbers listed in the documentation had been disconnected for over 2 years. Most damaging of all, Dr. Robert Whitman, the psychiatrist who had supposedly treated me for 18 months, had died in a car accident 14 months ago, making it impossible for him to have conducted therapy sessions as recently as the previous month. The forged medical records represented either a catastrophic mistake by Morrison and my parents, or evidence of deliberate fraud designed to destroy my reputation and credibility. Either way, their scheme was beginning to unravel as the lies became impossible to sustain under scrutiny. But even with this evidence, I remained homeless, financially devastated, and socially isolated. The damage to my reputation would take years to repair, assuming I could survive long enough to clear my name and rebuild my life. Some nights, sitting alone in my car while rain drummed against the windshield, I wondered if my parents' ultimate goal was not just to steal my money, but to drive me to complete despair. The discovery of the forged medical records gave me hope for the first time in weeks, but I knew the fight was far from over. Jennifer Walsh requested an urgent meeting the day after I provided her with evidence about the destroyed psychiatric facility. I expected to meet in her cramped public defender's office, but instead she invited me to a downtown law firm with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Rocky Mountains. The elegant conference room and expensive furnishings seemed inconsistent with her previous presentation as an overwhelmed public defender struggling with limited resources. Walsh's demeanor had transformed completely since our last meeting. Instead of appearing stressed and unprepared, she exuded confidence and professionalism as she spread documents across the polished mahogany table. When I questioned the change of venue, she smiled and revealed a secret that changed everything about my case. Jennifer Walsh was not actually a struggling public defender with minimal experience handling complex fraud cases. She was a former federal prosecutor who had spent 12 years investigating white-collar crimes for the United States Attorney's Office, specializing in cases involving identity theft, elder abuse, and organized fraud schemes. After successfully prosecuting hundreds of financial criminals, she had taken early retirement at age 45 and now devoted her time to pro bono cases involving sophisticated fraud tactics. Walsh explained that she had immediately recognized the hallmarks of an elaborate scam when she first reviewed my case file. The combination of forged documents, identity theft, family manipulation, and professional legal assistance indicated a level of sophistication that went far beyond typical family disputes over money. Her decision to pose as an inexperienced public defender allowed her to investigate the case thoroughly, while my parents and their attorney underestimated the quality of my legal representation. Over the past month, while I struggled with homelessness and social isolation, Walsh had been building a comprehensive counter case that would expose every aspect of my parents' criminal conspiracy. Her investigation had uncovered financial records, communication logs, and witness statements that painted a devastating picture of calculated fraud and identity theft spanning several years. The evidence Walsh presented was overwhelming. Bank records showed that Frank and Linda had been gambling heavily at Colorado casinos for over 4 years, accumulating debts totaling nearly $135,000. Casino security footage captured them making increasingly desperate bets while their losses mounted month after month. Credit card statements revealed luxury purchases, including expensive jewelry, designer clothing, and electronics that contradicted their image as modest, hard-working retirees. Most damaging were recorded phone conversations between my parents and Bradley obtained through court-authorized wiretaps that Walsh had secured during her federal investigation. The recordings captured frank discussions about their plan to steal my company by portraying me as mentally ill and financially irresponsible. Bradley's voice was clearly audible as he discussed strategies for documenting my supposedly erratic behavior and gathering evidence that could be used to remove me from leadership positions. Walsh had also discovered that Kevin Morrison, my parents' attorney, had a long history of representing clients involved in sophisticated fraud schemes. Although he had never been formally charged with criminal activity, Morrison's law practice specialized in cases involving asset seizure, family disputes over inheritance, and elderly clients claiming financial abuse by relatives. Several of his former clients had been investigated for fraud, though Morrison had always managed to avoid prosecution by claiming ignorance about his clients' illegal activities. The most shocking revelation came when Walsh presented evidence connecting Morrison to organized crime figures who specialized in asset theft and identity fraud. Phone records showed numerous conversations between Morrison and Vincent Torino, a known associate of the Denver crime family who operated various financial scams throughout Colorado and neighboring states. Bank transfers revealed that Morrison had received substantial payments from shell companies controlled by Torino's organization, suggesting that my parents' case was part of a larger criminal enterprise. Bradley's cooperation with the scheme had been secured through a combination of financial incentives and legal threats. Walsh's investigation revealed that Morrison had offered Bradley a $50,000 payment for his assistance, while simultaneously threatening to expose his own financial irregularities if he refused to participate. Bradley had been embezzling small amounts from various clients for over 2 years, using their funds to cover gambling debts at underground poker games in downtown Denver. The forged medical records from Serenity Hills represented Morrison's most serious mistake. Walsh's forensic investigation had determined that the documents were created using professional desktop publishing software, with letterhead and formatting copied from legitimate psychiatric facilities. However, the creators had failed to research the history of Serenity Hills before selecting it as the supposed source of my treatment records. Dr. Robert Whitman, the psychiatrist whose signature appeared on the forged documents, had indeed been a respected member of the psychiatric community before his death in a car accident. Morrison's team had apparently chosen his credentials from online medical directories without realizing that he was deceased. This oversight would prove fatal to their case, as it demonstrated clear intent to defraud the court system through fabricated evidence. Walsh filed criminal charges against Frank Linda Bradley and Morrison, alleging conspiracy to commit fraud, identity theft, elder abuse perjury, and violation of federal racketeering statutes. The charges carried potential sentences ranging from 5 to 20 years in prison, along with substantial financial penalties and restitution requirements. The evidence package Walsh submitted to the district attorney's office included over 800 pages of documentation, dozens of recorded phone conversations, financial records spanning 5 years, and expert testimony from forensic accountants and computer analysts. Her presentation was so comprehensive that the prosecutor immediately agreed to pursue maximum penalties against all defendants. Meanwhile, Walsh had been working with federal authorities to investigate Morrison's connections to organized crime and his potential involvement in other similar schemes. The FBI had opened a formal investigation into his law practice, examining dozens of cases where elderly clients had accused family members of financial abuse, with Morrison representing the accusers. As Walsh spread the evidence across the conference room table, I realized that my parents' scheme was far more sophisticated and far more criminal than I had ever imagined. They had not simply made poor financial decisions or acted out of misguided parental concern. Instead, they had deliberately chosen to partner with professional criminals to steal my life's work and destroy my reputation through fabricated evidence and perjured testimony. The upcoming court hearing would not be a family dispute over money, but rather the criminal prosecution of an organized fraud conspiracy that had systematically violated federal and state laws. My parents would soon discover that their choice of legal representation had connected them to dangerous criminals who viewed them as expendable tools rather than valued partners. The courtroom was packed with reporters, legal observers, and law enforcement officials on the morning of the final hearing. Judge Harrison had replaced Judge Martinez after Walsh's criminal complaint revealed the scope of the conspiracy case. Unlike the preliminary hearing, where Morrison had dominated the proceedings, today's session would feature a much different balance of power. Morrison appeared visibly nervous as he shuffled through his papers, occasionally glancing towards the back of the courtroom, where federal agents sat taking notes on the proceedings. His usual confidence and polish had been replaced by fidgeting and perspiration as he realized that his carefully constructed case was collapsing under the weight of Walsh's evidence. My parents sat rigidly beside Morrison, their expressions reflecting shock and confusion as they began to understand the serious criminal charges they were facing. Frank's face had aged years in the past month, while Linda clutched her handkerchief, but no longer projected the sympathetic image of a grieving mother. Bradley sat separately with his own attorney, having agreed to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for reduced charges. Judge Harrison called the court to order and immediately addressed the elephant in the room. He announced that he had read about Aqua Connect in Forbes magazine the previous week, featuring the company as one of the most promising environmental technology startups in the Rocky Mountain region. The article had described Aqua Connect's revolutionary approach to solving water quality issues in rural communities along with news of a major federal contract that would expand our services nationwide. The judge's statement sent shockwaves through the courtroom as he demanded to know why he was presiding over a case claiming that the founder of this successful company had stolen money from his parents to fund a failed business venture. His piercing gaze shifted between Morrison and my parents as he stated that someone in his courtroom was lying directly to his face, and he intended to discover who was attempting to defraud his court. Walsh rose to address the court, presenting her evidence in a calm, methodical manner that demonstrated her years of experience prosecuting federal crimes. She began by playing recorded phone conversations between my parents and Bradley, allowing the judge to hear their own voices as they discussed strategies for stealing my company and fabricating evidence to support their claims. The recordings were devastating. Frank's voice was clearly audible as he discussed forging documents and claiming that I had threatened him during family gatherings. Linda could be heard coaching Bradley on how to document my supposedly erratic behavior during business meetings. Most damaging of all was a conversation where Morrison provided detailed instructions about creating believable medical records that would support their claims about my mental illness. Walsh then presented the evidence about Serenity Hills Psychiatric Treatment Center, showing newspaper clippings and fire department reports, proving that the facility had been destroyed 3 years before my supposed treatment dates. Judge Harrison examined the forged medical records with obvious displeasure, noting the professional quality of the fabrication and the intent to deceive court officers. The financial evidence was equally compelling. Forensic accountants had traced every dollar of my parents' supposed retirement investment, revealing that the funds had actually been stolen through identity theft, using my personal information. Bank records showed that instead of investing their own savings, Frank and Linda had taken out loans in my name, then used those stolen funds to cover their gambling debts and luxury purchases. Bradley's testimony provided the final pieces of the puzzle as he confessed to his role in the conspiracy. Under oath, he admitted to recording private conversations, photographing confidential documents, and providing Morrison with detailed information about AquaConnect's operations and financial status. His cooperation with my parents had been motivated by both the promised payment and Morrison's threats to expose his own embezzlement activities. When Morrison attempted to defend his clients, Judge Harrison cut him off and demanded an explanation for the forged medical records. Morrison's response was evasive and unconvincing, as he claimed ignorance about the false documentation and suggested that his clients had been misled by unknown parties. The judge's expression made clear that he found these explanations completely unacceptable. The federal agents in the courtroom then revealed that Morrison was facing separate charges related to his involvement with organized crime figures and his participation in multiple fraud schemes throughout Colorado and neighboring states. The FBI investigation had uncovered evidence that Morrison's law practice was essentially a front for various criminal enterprises, with my parents' case representing just one example of his illegal activities. Judge Harrison dismissed all charges against me with prejudice, meaning they could never be refiled in any court. He ordered my parents to pay full restitution for emotional damages, legal fees, and business losses totaling over $350,000. Frank and Linda received suspended prison sentences of 3 years each, along with 5 years of probation and community service requirements. Bradley faced 18 months in federal prison for his role in the conspiracy, along with restitution payments for the funds he had embezzled from AquaConnect and other clients. Morrison received the harshest sentence, 8 years in federal prison for his leadership role in multiple fraud schemes, along with disbarment and forfeiture of all assets obtained through criminal activities. Dr. Sarah Chen testified about my mental stability and resilience, praising my ability to maintain psychological health despite experiencing extreme stress and trauma. Her evaluation had found no evidence of mental illness, substance abuse, or dangerous behavior completely contradicting the fabricated psychiatric records. The federal contract mentioned in Judge Harrison's Forbes reference was indeed real. AquaConnect had been selected to provide water purification technology and consulting services to Native American reservations throughout the western United States, representing a $50 million opportunity that would transform our company's future prospects. Marcus became my official business partner, replacing Bradley and bringing his technical expertise and unwavering loyalty to our expanded operations. His decision to stand by me during the darkest period of my life demonstrated the value of genuine friendship over family connections based solely on blood relations. The media coverage of the resolution was extensive, with local and national outlets featuring stories about how sophisticated fraud schemes can target successful entrepreneurs and small business owners. My case became a cautionary tale about the importance of protecting personal information and recognizing warning signs of financial manipulation even when the perpetrators are family members. The experience taught me invaluable lessons about trusting my instincts when people's actions contradict their words. My parents' early support had always felt conditional and controlling, but I had ignored those warning signs because I wanted to believe in their love and genuine concern for my welfare. The identity theft during college should have been a clear indicator that someone close to me was actively sabotaging my financial independence. More importantly, I learned to value relationships based on character and loyalty rather than biological connections. Marcus had risked his own career and personal relationships to stand beside me when everyone else abandoned ship. His friendship proved more valuable than the supposed love of family members who viewed me as an asset to be exploited rather than a person to be cherished. AquaConnect's expansion into federal contracts allowed us to help thousands of communities access clean, reliable drinking water while building a sustainable business that could employ dozens of people throughout Colorado and neighboring states. Our success story became proof that innovation and determination can overcome even the most sophisticated attempts at sabotage and theft. The no-contact relationship I maintained with my parents felt painful initially, but ultimately provided peace and security that allowed me to focus on building genuine relationships with people who valued honesty and mutual respect. Their suspended sentences meant they avoided prison time, but their reputations in the community were permanently destroyed as neighbors, and former friends learned about their criminal activities. Looking back on this experience, I recognize how close I came to losing everything I had worked to build. Without Walsh's expertise and dedication, Morrison's sophisticated fraud scheme might have succeeded in stealing my company and destroying my future. The importance of quality legal representation cannot be overstated when facing criminal accusations, even when those accusations come from family members who claim to love you. The ultimate irony was that my parents' attempt to steal my moderately successful startup occurred just months before AquaConnect received recognition and federal contracts that would make it genuinely valuable. Their impatience and greed prevented them from sharing in legitimate success that could have benefited our entire family if they had simply continued supporting my efforts honestly. Today, AquaConnect serves over 40 Native American communities across 8 states, providing clean water access to more than 15,000 people who previously relied on contaminated sources. Our work has been featured in environmental magazines, technology journals, and government reports as an example of how private innovation can address critical infrastructure challenges in underserved areas. The company's success has allowed me to establish a scholarship fund for students from rural communities who want to study environmental engineering and water management technologies. Each scholarship recipient represents someone who might develop even better solutions to the water quality challenges facing small communities throughout America. If you've ever faced betrayal from people you trusted completely, or if you've questioned your instincts about family members whose support felt conditional or manipulative, I want to hear about your experiences. How did you recognize the warning signs that something was wrong? What advice would you give to someone dealing with family members who view them as financial opportunities rather than loved ones? Please share your thoughts and stories in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video if it helped you understand the importance of protecting yourself from financial manipulation. Subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming betrayal and building genuine success despite the people who try to tear you down. Share this story with anyone who might benefit from learning about sophisticated fraud schemes and the warning signs that can help protect them from similar experiences. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you build stronger boundaries with people who claim to love you while secretly planning your destruction. Remember that genuine love supports your independence and success, while manipulation always seeks to control and exploit your achievements for someone else's benefit. Trust your instincts, protect your personal information, and surround yourself with people whose actions consistently match their words.